How to start a rent-to-rent business with only £5,000. So let's get into this then. So your setup costs for your rent-to-rent business typically are going to be around £5,000. The fact that you only need around £5,000 to get started is a huge pro for rent-to-rent. With most other businesses, you need a lot more than that to get started. Rent-to-rent can be a great way to get started in property business with minimal capital. Typically, you're going to need around £1,000 to get your company set up and compliant. And your first rent-to-rent deal should cost you around £4,000. A breakdown of those costs should be 1 month's rent to the landlord, maybe 1 month's deposit, and then you have to furnish the property. But in terms of getting started quickly in property, it's the best way. You can invest £4,000 to £5,000 in a rent-to-rent deal and make back £10,000 to £11,000 by the end of year one. Most rent-to-rent deals are based over a 5-year term, which means you can potentially make around £54,000 to £60,000 over that 5-year term, all from originally investing around £4,000 to £5,000. So it's an amazing way to get started in property quickly. So let's go a bit deeper into your setup costs. So your setup costs will cost around £1,000. You'll need to get your company registered. You'll need to become compliant with the relevant insurances, contracts, and you need to set up your business admin. You'll also need to pay for some marketing materials like business cards, leaflets, and your basic office setup. Microsoft Office or Google Workspace will be fine. Remember, this is a small upfront cost to get the business ready. Once you have a solid foundation, it will make things a lot easier to move on and actually get deals. So moving on to finding a rent-to-rent property. So typically you want to look for HMOs. So you want to be looking for HMO properties. For example, a 6-bedroom HMO. I got started in Newport, South Wales 7 years ago, and my first property was a 6-bedroom HMO. It was a townhouse, relatively new built. The landlord wanted a long-term fixed guaranteed rent. I offered him that. I then cleaned and furnished the property over a weekend with my girlfriend and my father. And then 2 days later, I re-rented the same property out to a group of working professionals for a premium. And when they paid me that money, that was the exact moment that I knew rent to rent was real. Back then I was paying around £1,100 per house, but nowadays the figures are more close to £1,500 per month. So expect to rent a 5 to 6 bedroom HMO for around £1,500 a month in today's market. Obviously, if you're working in London, it's going to be a lot more than that. Now, when you're negotiating this deal with a landlord, you want to aim to negotiate a rent-free period of 2 to 4 weeks to cover preparation time. So let's say, for example, you're negotiating with a landlord now. Rather than getting the keys and starting on the 1st of November, you would start paying the landlord rent on the 1st of December. And you'd aim to use those 4 weeks in November to prepare the property. So what does that look like? Well, you may need to paint and decorate the property. You'll need to furnish the property, and then you need to market the property. And this can all take at least a couple weeks. Then you have to do viewings and get people in the door to have a look, get them signed up, and then finally you receive the rent. This whole process can take 2 to 4 weeks. So by negotiating a rent-free period, it gives you a bit of time to make your service work smoothly, to get ahead of the game. And rather than paying a landlord rent from your own money, if you do this correctly, you could even find a few tenants within that period of time, collect their rent, and then use their rent to pay the bulk of your first month's guaranteed rent, which means you're not actually spending your own money, you're using the tenant's money to pay the rent, which reduces your startup cost significantly. Once you master this, then you don't pay a deposit. You start with your first month's rent 2 to 4 weeks after you've agreed the deal. So this is a great way to improve your return on investment. The less you spend up front, the quicker you get your money back. So ultimately, this gives you time to prepare the property and potentially reduce upfront costs by getting tenants in early. Moving on to refurbishing on a budget. Now, as I mentioned, the goal here is to give the property a cosmetic refurbishment only. So your main focuses will be painting, decorating, and generally just improving the perceived value of the property. This can cost anywhere from £700 to £1,500, depending on if you do it yourself or you hire labour. The goal here is to keep it simple, don't overinvest, improve the perceived value on a budget. Remember, it's not your property, and the more you spend, the longer it's going to take for you to get your investment back. So keep it simple and don't overinvest. Your next step is furnishing the property. We spend around £300 per room maximum on furnishings. We use companies like IKEA, or we use used furniture from charity shops, and we get creative in this process. We want to improve the perceived value of the property without spending much money. So again, similar to the refurbishment, you want to make the property look a lot nicer, make it feel a lot more homely, without spending too much money, because again, you don't own the property, and the more you spend, the longer it's going to take for you to get your investment back. You could even look at leasing furniture to reduce your upfront cost. You wouldn't have to pay your upfront cost, you just pay off the furniture monthly. And once you've got tenants in and you're making money, then that payment will just come out of your profit. So leasing furniture can really reduce your upfront expenses and improve cash flow early on. My rule of thumb is to make your money back within 6 months. If you can make your money back within 6 months, then it's a good deal. An example here would be if you're making £875 profit per month, then in 5 to 6 months, you're going to have made all of your initial investment back. And if it's a 3 to 5 year contract, then that means for the next 2.5 to 4.5 years, it's all profit. Obviously, you may have some void periods here or there. Generally speaking, you want to keep those to a minimum. Our voids at the moment each year are around 2%. Spending less upfront means you'll recoup your investment quicker, and making your money back within 6 months is my rule of thumb. And this is a key rule for determining whether a deal is a winner. So when you do your numbers, if you can clearly see that you're going to make your money back within 6 months, then it's a good deal and you should go ahead and snap it up. So just to summarize what we've discussed today, you want to keep your costs low and you want to aim for high returns. Similar to any business, you want to be buying for low and selling for high, or in this case, renting for low, invest in minimal capital to improve the perceived value, and then you want to rent the property out for a higher return. That's the game here, guys. So this is the general framework of building a successful rent-to-rent business. If you want to learn more about rent-to-rent and you want me to help you build this business, then the next step would be to book a free discovery call to learn more, and I'll guide you through this process step by step. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.